Welcome to the Dorado Gaming Deck Series. Dorado Gaming is your site for premier accessories like metal dice and playmats. Dorado Gaming sponsors the My Mythical Meta podcast, and the deck series features Magic the Gathering decks played by the My Mythical Meta crew. Subscribe to the channel and comment with your own suggestions or questions for the players. Welcome back to the Dorado Gaming Deck Series. I'm your host, Travis, and I'm joined this week by my brother, Benjamin.
Hello.
We are filming in the same room together.
Woo!
Yay, we are such great brothers and happy friends, and my house is still under construction. We have an amazing deck for you, and I mostly say that it's amazing because it started out as my idea. And Benjamin took this idea and has refined it. He's made it better than I made it to start with. We are going to talk about what was once a Secret Santa deck, Benjamin's Jon Irenicus Shattered One deck.
And I was really excited when you gave me this deck. It's something that plays along a different axis than most decks that anybody plays. And so the wheels started turning. It took me probably about a year to get it to where it is now, without a whole lot of cost or a whole lot of changes, but with just some tender loving care.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's read Jon Irenicus Shattered One to get us started. He costs 2 blue and black. This is a Dimir control style, but as you'll see with Jon Irenicus, he controls in a very interesting way. He's going to affect the board in a way that we really haven't seen before. He costs 2 blue and a black for a 3/3 elf wizard, legendary creature. And here's his abilities. At the beginning of your end step, target opponent gains control of up to 1 target creature you control. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on it and tap it. It's goaded for the rest of the game, and it gains this creature can't be sacrificed. So, that first paragraph of text tells us at the end of your turn, you're going to give one of your creatures to somebody else.
Right.
It has to attack, and they can't sacrifice it. So, all of that just means they are stuck with it.
Yes.
They are stuck with that creature until they or an opponent can remove it. But you want them to keep it. Then, Jon has his second line of text. Whenever a creature you own, but don't control, attacks, you draw a card.
Right.
Yeah, that makes him a better commander because now your hand gets to stay full.
Yes. Every time that something you've given away attacks, or as you'll see, we have a couple of other ways to give stuff away, you just refill in your hand, and you can just get to sit back. They're attacking each other, you just keep drawing your cards, and it just keeps the engine going.
Yep, that's what goaded means. As long as another opponent is in the game, those creatures have to attack someone that's not you, Jon Irenicus' owner. They have to attack somebody else. So, whenever I created this Secret Santa deck, obviously Jon's first paragraph just cries out, I have gifts for you, but these gifts are bad. They are the poisoned cup. You want to give your opponents bad things that they have to keep. And that makes this commander and this deck so special. What a showcase for a bunch of creatures that no one else is playing in any decks.
Right, I even put it in sleeves of Santa Claus. There's Santa Claus sleeves when you come out, it's like, I come bearing gifts.
I come bearing gifts. For any Warhammer fans out there, Grandfather Nurgle, his gifts are diseases that he wants to spread to everyone. Disease and pestilence. And that is Jon Irenicus' story. He says, I have gathered all of these bad, awful creatures, and I'm going to give them to other people. In Magic design, especially in its early days, they loved to do this. They would make a really cheap creature that could come out really early in the game, but it would have a downside, a cost to pay in order to have this big, powerful creature early in the game.
Right.
So with a deck like this, you get to play those creatures early, give them to your opponents, and let them suffer from the poison throughout the game.
Right. Yeah, that's the plan. And what I've noticed when I see a lot of deck techs, and even what your Secret Santa deck was, there tends to be this temptation to really overload with those downside creatures, to really want to put in everything there is. And what I found in our first playthrough when we did it was that was really fun, but also I really wanted to be playing only one creature at a time, so I wasn't stuck with them myself, and which meant I was left shields down with just my commander that I needed to stay in play so I could keep drawing cards. And so I was sitting on the back foot. I think there's a tendency, the typical template for a commander deck is that you need 30 of your theme, but I think 30 downside creatures is a bit too much. And so we'll see that we have other ways to try to get those out and make sure that they are coming out on time and that you're constantly giving away these downside creatures.
Okay, so we are going to break this deck down into its component categories. For our philosophy, the way we build decks is we look at the categories ramp, card draw, removal, synergy, and then usually there's a small section of plan B or recursion or protection. How are you going to ensure that your game plan continues? Let's talk first about the ramp for this deck. As we were talking before and looking at the deck, I'm noticing that this Dimir ramp package is pretty standard.
Yeah, absolutely. I have 10 pieces of artifact ramp. I've got of course, your Soul Ring, your Wayfarer's Bauble, and then a bunch of the 2 mana artifacts that, Talisman of Dominance or Mind Stone, just the things that help you quickly get to the late game. The curve on this deck is relatively low, only 2 6-drops, only a few 5-drops, and everything else is 4 and below. So if you get from 2 to 4, by playing a 2 mana ramp spell, then you can play pretty much your entire deck. So there's not a whole lot. It's 10 cards that are all 2 or 1 mana.
Yeah, very good. We like to look for synergistic ramp that goes with what our commander is doing. But I think in this deck, you're going to find that all your other stuff is doing what your commander is
exactly.
doing.
Like the whole deck is built around that, so the mana is just very standard.
Yeah, the mana is pretty straightforward, and you just want to get there. So make sure that you've got your Soul Ring. It comes in pre-packaged with every pre-constructed commander deck, so make sure you've got it and your other mana rocks, your other mana artifacts, and you should be fine for this deck. Let's get to a category that I think is a little more fun and a little more important, your card draw. Remember that card draw is important in any commander deck. You have 99 cards that are all different. And so you need to have cards in your deck that say draw a card. That way you can get to the more winning cards more often. Your chances of drawing any particular one card are low. And so you can affect that probability by adding card draw into your deck. So Benjamin, tell us your philosophy about adding card draw into this deck.
Okay, so the big thing here is that Jon Irenicus himself is a card draw engine. He says whenever one of your creatures you own but don't control attack, you draw a card. So your main thing here is you want a lot of creatures that you can give away quickly, and then as soon as you have him out and somebody is forced to attack, you start drawing cards. So what I've done is I've created a lot of really cheap creatures. They're all 3 or less so that they can be played before Jon Irenicus comes out. They either let me filter through the deck or just simply draw a card as soon as they come into play. And that allows you to see a bunch of cards very quickly. So at the low end, you have cards like Fairy Seer. Fairy Seer is a 1 mana 1/1 with flying that says when it enters the battlefield, scry 2. So turn 1, play an island, play a Fairy Seer. I'm now looking 2 cards deeper and able to find what I need for to set up the next couple of turns.
Yeah, find a mana rock, find your next land, find your next flyer.
Exactly.
Your next creature to drop.
Yeah, and there's some older Magic philosophy that says scry 3. If you're in a long game, scry 3 is basically draw a card. So Fairy Seer is pretty close to that. And the important thing about a lot of these is they have evasion, so that when I give them away, they're not just being run into somebody's blocker and going away. They can stay on the board. So Fairy Seer in this case has flying, and it's going to get 2+1/+1 counters from Jon Irenicus. So it's going to be a 3/3 flying when I give it to someone else, and that'll survive a lot of blockers. So that's a source of early selection, and then as soon as I play Jon Irenicus, it's a source of additional card draw. Moving on to 2-drops, Baleful Strix is basically the perfect card for this deck.
Yeah.
It's a 1/1 for 2, a blue and a black, that says when it enters the battlefield, draw a card, and it has flying and death touch. So it comes down and gets you a card immediately, and then you can use it to block if you need to. It sets up some early defense, but then when Jon Irenicus comes down, you give it away. It gets those +1/+1 counters. So now it's a 3/3 flying death touch. If they want to kill it, they have to put a flying creature that's bigger in front of it, and then it's still going to die because of death touch. So it really disincentivizes blocking, and you're going to continue to get that card draw from Jon Irenicus over and over again.
If they don't want to block the Death Touch Baleful Strix, they're going to get more damage in. Your opponents are going to have to take more damage from this goaded Baleful Strix, and you get to draw more cards.
Exactly. It's like everything this deck wants to do. And then In the 3-drop slot, I just like cards with options. Cards that are really versatile. So there are 2 that are like that are very similar. There's Aether Channeler that costs 2 and a blue for a 2/1 human wizard that says when it enters the battlefield, choose 1. You can create a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. So again, that's something you can trade away and have an evasive goated creature. Or you can return another non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So it's a form of interaction. Or the reason it's in this category, draw a card. And the one that's very similar to it is Callous Blood Mage. It's 2 and a black for a 2/1 vampire warlock that says when it enters the battlefield, choose 1. Create a 1/1 black and green pest token, draw a card and lose a life, or exile target player's graveyard. So both of these, they come in. If I need to draw a card and dig more, I can, but I can also create a token to kind of clog up the ground a little bit, or get additional things to trade away, or interact with my opponents in some way.
Exiling target player's graveyard, this is great. As we've talked about in our Boogeyman episode, we have a lot of graveyard decks running around that are, for the most part, unchecked. That's why we're really afraid of all of these graveyard recursion decks. So make sure that you have some graveyard hate in each deck that you're building. I wanted to come back to Aether Channeler. I have a newfound respect for bounce removal.
Yes.
It is so cheap, and it undoes your opponent's last turn.
Yes.
Like, whatever they just did, I mean, it's just a waste of 5, 6, 9 mana, whatever big thing they played. Say, nah, put it back in your hand. Do it again.
Right. And it lets you get in some damage, too. You just played your 10/10 Blightsteel Colossus? No, you didn't. And I can attack through you now.
Yeah. My newfound respect from that comes from my Nabon Dean of Iteration deck. This was a wizard deck that I very recently made that's full of wizards that do this. Aether Channeler is in that deck, where you play it and you bounce something back to somebody's hand.
Yeah.
And because Nabon lets you do it twice, like, I really respect this kind of removal now because it's so cheap.
Yeah.
It's so cheap. And if you remove it to their graveyard, there's probably a cheap way to get it out from their graveyard. Put it back in their hand? No, pay full price for it.
Yeah.
Pay full price for it again. I have a newfound respect for that. So Aether Channeler and Callous Blood Mage, I think these are really excellent picks for this deck because of the options that you described.
Yeah.
I think that's really smart.
And the nice thing is, because they're so versatile, it's nice that they come in on a body because that's additional card draw at least one more time when you send them away with Jon Irenicus. But as you'll see from this deck, basically everything is a creature because everything allows you to, when you play it, give it away at some point and start drawing cards from it to get to the other things that have options. So yeah. Another one with options, it's a different kind of options, is Sicarian Infiltrator. It's a 2/1. Sorry, it's a 1/2 human soldier that costs 2 and a blue. It has flash and squad 2. So that means when you cast it, you can play 2 any number of times, and you get token copies of that when it resolves. So in this case, if you pay 3, you get your 1/2 human soldier. If you pay 5, you get 2 of them, and so on. 7, 9. So this scales with the late game, and it just says when it enters the battlefield, draw a card. So for 3 mana, you get your soldier and draw a card. For 5, you get 2 soldiers and 2 cards. 7, you get 3 soldiers and 3 cards. And so I really like the option of being able to scale that. It's one of the few creatures that scales really well in this deck. And it allows you to refill your hand in the late game if your game plan has gone horribly wrong, and gives you lots of ways to throw up defense, and obviously lots of fodder that you can trade away for future card draw.
That flash speed is great. I mean, it basically makes for a really bad fog.
Yes.
Somebody thinks they're going to come into a walls down situation. They think they're going to get in some free damage. You say, nope, I'm going to flash in this blocker. 1 Sicarian Infiltrator, 2 Sicarian Infiltrators, 3. You're going to refill your hand and block whatever incoming damage they had. I think flash makes this card really special.
Yeah. Yes, the flash makes it special and provides an additional option. Like he said, the fog, right? You can just hold that up. Having it in your hand lets you pass the turn, and everyone's like, what? You didn't play one of your 40 creatures this turn? What's going on? And there's not a lot of instance in this deck, so they may not have seen it and might be caught unawares. They might think you're out of gas.
Yeah.
You're holding a land in your hand to bluff, and then they come in for the attack and you refill your hand and block it. Yeah.
Really good.
One last one is Pilgrim's Eye, and it's indicative of a lot of these, just a flying creature that comes in and puts a card in your hand. In this case, I included it even though it's a bit lackluster because I love it. When you get a land in your hand, it guarantees that you're going to hit Jon Irenicus next turn. right? A Pilgrim's Eye with 3 mana means you have Jon Irenicus with 4 mana the next turn.
Yeah, it's a guarantee. It costs 3 colorless, an artifact creature, 1/1 with flying. So it's that 1/1 flyer that we want to give to other people. It's a goated 3/3 that they can't get rid of. And whenever you play it, you get a land.
Yeah. And it fixes, and that's one of the things that, you might have a Soul Ring and a Reliquary Tower, and you're like, how am I going to play Jon Irenicus? Or more importantly, I have a couple of things that have a lot of pips in them, and this will help you get the right color when you're going into turn 4. So that's kind of nice.
All right, so we only talked about 6 of these, low-cost 1/1 flyers that draw a card. If you want to know more cards like this, you can obviously check the deck list. We love the website Scryfall, where you can use the advanced search to find creatures with flying that have the text draw a card, or creatures with flying that have the text scry. And that way you can fill the rest of this category with things you find that you like. What effect do you want to have on your 1/1 flyer? You can search for that and be able to customize the deck in a way that you want.
Right. Absolutely. And I recommend you do that. I did carefully craft the deck, but a lot of these were cards that I already had in my collection and are fungible, right? There's, Tome Raider or Cloud Conceer or, any number of cards that say, flying enters the battlefield, draw a card. Flying enters the battlefield, scry. Flying enters the battlefield, surveil. Flying enters the battlefield, explore.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of variations on that, and it depends where you want to go with some of the other cards that you can choose which ones to put. This deck list is public on Archidect. We can put that in the description if you're watching this on YouTube to see which other ones that we chose to put in the deck.
Yeah, we're going to move next to removal and interaction. It's important to be able to deal with your opponent's threats. We've talked so far about how Jon likes to give his goated creatures to other players, and so this deck does put on constant pressure to others, even though you're not the one attacking. But the rest of the cards in this next category are about getting rid of opponents' blockers, pesky enchantments, pesky parts of their game plan, so that you can still get through. So this is our interaction or removal category.
Yeah, we have 14 in this category, but we're just going to highlight 5 of kind of the emblematic ones.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite ones is Bloodthirsty Blade. Bloodthirsty Blade is a 2-mana artifact equipment. It says equipped creature gets +2/+0 and is goated. And then you can pay 1 to attach it to a creature an opponent controls. Activate as a sorcery. So one of the nice things about this deck is obviously you're not trying to wipe the board often because that destroys your game plan. You're really wanting to pinpoint removal. And sometimes the opponent has something that's indestructible or has something with regenerate or has something that you don't mind being on the board as long as it's not swinging at you.
Mm-hmm.
And so just equip it with a Bloodthirsty Blade, and it has to go at one of your opponents instead. And of course, if it's something that with a tap ability, they either have to use it in their first main phase or attack and lose it. And it makes that creature even more powerful. So if someone's playing an Infect or Poison or getting in with commander damage, you can hasten your opponent's downfall with Bloodthirsty Blade. I really like it as a removal option that doesn't really make the players quite as salty as...
Oh no, not at all.
Because if you Bloodthirsty Blade my Voltron commander, I still get to play with it. I'm having lots of fun. You just made it better.
Yeah.
Right? And so, but it also protects me in that I did not get rid of your creature, but it's not coming at me, so I can continue with my game plan like normal.
I really love Bloodthirsty Blade. Okay, tell us about Kitesail Larcenist.
Okay, Kitesail Larcenist is one of the ways that you can get rid of permanents that are not creatures. There's a lot of creature removal in this deck. Other permanents are a little bit more difficult. So it's a human pirate, 2/3, that costs 2 and a blue, and it has flying and ward 1, which is pesky and basically hexproof.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it says, whenever it enters the battlefield, for each player, choose up to 1 other target artifact or creature that player controls. For as long as Kitesail Larcenist remains on the battlefield, the chosen permanent becomes a treasure artifact with sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color, and loses all other abilities. So they get a token out of it, but you can take care of a pesky artifact, you can take care of a pesky creature, and the nice thing is, it says for as long as it remains on the battlefield, where it has ward 1, you're about to put 2+1/+1 counters on it and make it where it can't be sacrificed. So it gets harder to remove in this deck than in normal decks. And in the meantime, they have to decide, do they want that mana, or are they going to hold out for Kitesail Larcenist and hope that it die so they get their thing back. A lot of people will just use that treasure token to further their game plan. It's a real easy way to get rid of problem artifacts or creatures.
I think Kitesail Larcenist is fantastic. When you give it to somebody else, it's going to be a 4/5.
Yes.
That leap from 3 to 5 toughness is big.
Yes.
There's a lot of things that would be able to kill it if it were 3 that can't now kill it.
Absolutely.
That seems kind of dumb, but the leap from 3 to 5 toughness is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And Kitesail Larcenist is going to stay on the battlefield for a lot longer. And this is going to keep swinging.
Yeah. And it has flying. You'll see a lot of these have flying. It's just one of those things that evasion really helps the game plan. So there's a lot of creatures that might be cheaper that can do things like this, but once you start getting to 3 or higher on the curve, you really want evasion to keep them on the field longer.
Yeah. This card costs 69 cents.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
The next type of removal we're looking for is discard.
Yeah, so I put a lot of specters and things that cause discard. One of the ones I really want to highlight is Una's Blackguard. It's a fairy rogue 1/1 for 1 and a black. Has flying. Says each other rogue creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. Not really relevant in this deck. There's only one other rogue. But whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card. So this is a little 1/1 flyer with no counters. So what are you doing with it? Well, when you give it away, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So it becomes a 3/3 flying with the +1/+1 counters on it, meaning when it connects and it's attacking someone other than you, they will discard a card. It has to attack someone else because it's goaded. So it's a good repeatable source of discard. While you have Jon Irenicus out, it's also a good repeatable source of card draw. And the beautiful thing about Una's Blackguard is that if you give it to someone who's playing a +1/+1 counters deck, or someone who's playing rogues or shapeshifters, changelings, right, things like that.
Or just another creature you've already given them.
Right, yeah, that's right. Every creature that you've given them also has +1/+1 counters on it, will quickly decimate people's hands, right, with this. I really like these repeatable discard outlets, and this one's so cheap, and you don't have to wait a full turn to see it in effect. So normally, you would play this, you have to wait, any Spectre, you wait till your next turn to be able to attack with it. But with this, you give it to the next person in turn order. It's like it has haste. They've controlled it since the beginning of their turn. Mm-hmm. So they immediately have to attack someone else who hasn't had a chance to kill it or defend against it. They're going to discard the card. So it's a really efficient way to get rid of answers or problem threats that people are holding in their hand.
Absolutely brutal, repeatable for only 2 mana, costs 39 cents on Card Kingdom.
Yeah.
This is an incredible choice. I think it's inspired.
Thanks.
Let's do Brazen Borrower. I want to read a card. You've been reading all of them.
Sure.
Brazen Borrower. It actually has an adventure called Petty Theft. You pay 1 and a blue for an instant. Return target non-land permanent and opponent controls to its owner's hand. Just like I was mentioning earlier, this is a great tempo disruption for your opponents. For a non-land permanent. So we talked a little bit about how blue and black don't have a lot of enchantment answers, and this is one of your ways to do it. And then, once it's on its adventure, Brazen Borrower is a 3/1 fairy rogue. It costs 1 blue. It has flash. It has flying, and it can block only creatures with flying. So when it comes back, it's what you've been looking for all along, a powerful flyer. Yep. This one is a 3/1. So once you give it away now, and goad it, it's a 5/3. That is a lot of meat coming in with a huge cudgel every turn.
Yes.
Yeah. 5 damage flying coming in every turn is a lot.
And one of the nice things about the bounce removal in this is sometimes you want your own creature back. Mm-hmm. So let's say I've played a Baleful Strix and I've given it away and I really just want an additional card. I can use Brazen Borrower to return it back to my hand, replay it, and get me a card, and then give it away again. Or some of the things we're about to talk about later, right? I can use it to redestroy someone's creature. This deck is full of ETBs, enter the battlefield effects. And the bounce removal that's in the deck allows me to replay those also, in addition to the tempo plays and setting people back a turn.
I think Brazen Borrower is a great choice. Do you know what set this is from? This says it's a promo.
Well, it's a Secret Lair, that one. It's from the original Eldraine.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Last one for this category is an enter the battlefield, destroy creatures.
Yes, so there's several of those in the deck, and again, you can do whichever ones you like, but I really like this one, Dalek Drone. It costs 3 black for an artifact creature, Dalek. It's a 3/3. It has flying and menace, so once again, the evasive beaters. It says when it enters the battlefield, destroy target creature an opponent controls. That player loses 3 life. So, efficient, brutal.
Why does it have the player loses 3 life? Why? It's just as bad. Yeah, that's awesome. It enters, gets rid of a pesky blocker, something with a great effect, and they lose 3 life on top of it. Just add insult to injury.
Yes.
Guys, even though this is a Dalek, even though it's from one of the special universes beyond Doctor Who decks, it's still only 50 cents.
Yeah.
So a lot of these cards, the card that I'm holding in my hand looks like it's from one of the collector boosters.
Yeah.
It's because it's got that special foiling on it. But just because these were from an exclusive set doesn't mean they weren't massively printed. These Universes Beyond cards are not difficult to acquire.
No,
you
not
can
at all.
You can still acquire them for just as cheap as any other set.
Yep, absolutely. And in fact, most of this deck is fairly cheap and can easily function without the expensive cards. The commander itself, only 50 cents.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, so our next category?
Our next category is what you've all been waiting for. This is the synergy category, and my brother has titled it Beaters with Downsides. These are big monsters that you can give to your opponents, and they are just going to cripple or hurt your opponents once you give it to them. It is the poisoned cup saying, oh, take this gift. You know, worm tongue whispering in your opponent's ears, oh, I have such a wonderful gift for you, and it turns out to just absolutely cripple them. This is not the last category. Our last category is going to be that Plan B protection category, but we wanted to show you what you're protecting, what you're recurring. We wanted to show you what the fun part of this game plan is, so that the last category actually matters.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, you've been churning through your deck, you've been interacting, ramping. What are you ramping into? Let's start with Evil Eye of Ormspy Gore. It's a creature. It costs 4 and a black. It's an eye, and its first line of text says, non-eye creatures you control can't attack. So if I give this to my opponent, this is the only creature they have that can attack. And it cannot be blocked except by walls.
Guess unless they have changelings.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true. Changelings can be walls. Yeah.
Or changelings are eyes.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Changelings are both eyes and walls. So they can attack and block. So it's a 3/6. So once I give it to somebody, it's going to be a 5/8 that is essentially unblockable and stops all of their other creatures from attacking. So this is the card you give to the token player.
Yep.
This is the card you give to the hexproof indestructible Voltron player. Right? This is the card you give to somebody who's really threatening your life. You say, "Excuse me, your creatures need to sit back and watch what an eye can do."
Yeah. It is relevant. I think that Magic has only printed these 2 eye creatures.
Yes. So the other eye is similar. It's Evil Eye of Urborg. Also says non-eye creatures you control can't attack. It also costs 4 and a black. It's a 6/3 instead of a 3/6. So when I give it away, it will be an 8/5. And it says, if it becomes blocked by a creature, destroy that creature. So that creature doesn't even get a chance to do... This is like super first strike.
Yeah.
With Death Touch. So it's plowing in. It doesn't matter how many creatures. You can't double and triple block it to try to get rid of it. They will all be destroyed as soon as they are declared as blockers. So it's basically unkillable in combat and prevents all of your creatures from attacking, and it's huge. So yes, it'll likely get chump blocked most of the time, but hey, if it's holding back everything else they have,
yeah,
and forcing one of my other opponents to sacrifice a creature every turn, I'll take that.
Amazing 2 cards. The version that I had of this deck did not have these, and it's just a great pick, and I think they're 35 cents. How much is Ormspy Gore?
Yeah, 35 cents.
35 cents. You can pick these up. No one except Jon Irenicus players are playing these Evil Eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's not a huge demand on them, which keeps their price low. Okay, which downside beaters next?
I'm going to do Grid Monitor.
Okay.
There's another one, Steel Golem, that's similar, but I'm going to focus on Grid Monitor here. It is a 4-mana artifact creature. It's 4/6 for a 4-mana creature. That's a great rate. And it says, you can't play creature spells. Now, obviously, I will only play this when I have Jon Irenicus in play, so
right.
and it will be the last thing I do on that turn. I will play Grid Monitor, and pass turn, that will trigger the instep of Jon Irenicus, where I give it to someone else, and now that player cannot play creature spells. they have a 6/8 artifact creature that has to attack someone else, and that's all they will ever have.
Yeah, I mean, it's an absolutely amazing pick. Like we said, Steel Golem does the same. It costs 3, but to completely shut off someone else's ability to cast creatures, they have to spend their own removal spell on it.
Yeah, it can't be sacrificed.
It can't be sacrificed. They have to use their own removal spell that are supposed to be used on your opponent's creatures to take out something that's on their own field.
Yeah.
In order to enable them to play creatures again. Debilitating ability.
Yep. The next one, there's several of these that are they're very cheap for a really good rate that have a kind of an inconvenient ability that just helps me get in chip damage constantly. So the one I'm going to highlight on this is Serendib Efreet. It's 3 mana, 2 and a blue for a creature Efreet. It's a 3/4 flying. So 3/4 flying for 3
Whoa!
is a really good rate.
Yeah, that's incredible.
When I give it away, it's going to be a 5/6 flying. And I love how it curves into Jon Irenicus. So I play this on turn 3. It's great for a blocker. Yes, I'll take 1 damage on my upkeep.
Oh, poor Benjamin. 1 damage on your upkeep. Ouch.
Yeah. But then I will give it away to someone else. They'll also take 1 damage every upkeep and start hitting my opponents for 5 in the air.
Yeah.
So I have a couple like this. Another one is Pitiless Horde. It is a 5/3 for 3. So when I give it away, it'll be a 7/5 for 3 mana, right? And once again, it curves right into Jon Irenicus. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 2 life. So if I play this turn 3, I will take 2 life loss on my upkeep, but then I give it away. It's beating into someone else for 7 damage, and they're losing 2 life as well. So it's that chip damage that just helps me close out the game when they're stuck with losing 2 life every turn. So there's several like that. And another one, what I love about this one, this is called Sleeper Agent. It's 1 mana, a black mana, for a 3/3 minion. 1 mana for a 3/3. Says
wait a second, that's not right.
It does have the downside of at the beginning of your upkeep, it deals 2 damage to you, but it also does Jon Irenicus's ability for you. It says when it comes into play, target opponent gains control of it. So if I play this on turn 1 or turn 2, yeah, it's possible that they'll swing it straight at me, but by the time it gets to their turn, before they can swing it a second time, they will have taken 4 damage.
Yep.
And I can play Jon Irenicus and possibly give something else away, meaning I'm going to draw 2 cards from Jon Irenicus instead of just 1. So the nice thing about Sleeper Agent is, yes, it does the chip damage, it's an above rate creature, and it's helping me to draw cards without having to do the 1 a turn thing that Jon Irenicus does. Helps me draw those cards a little bit faster.
Yeah, awesome choice.
Okay, and another one that gets in chip damage, but much faster, is Flesh Reaver.
Sick. Absolutely sickening. I've seen this particular monster in play once when we gave it to Randy in the debut of the Ascension Classic, and it just dealt tons and tons of damage to him.
Yes.
As well as the other people that he was attacking.
Yes.
It was just really, really cool.
Flesh Reaver is a 2 mana, costs 1 and a black. For a 4/4. It's a Phyrexian Horror. It says whenever it deals damage to a creature or opponent, it deals that much damage to you. So I can avoid that damage when I play it by just not attacking or blocking with it, right? But once I give it away, so it gets 2+1/+1 counters, it becomes a 6/6. It is goaded, so it has to attack.
Yeah.
So you have to swing in, and if they block with it, you'll take 6 damage. If it connects with the opponent, they and you will take 6 damage. And so it's crazy how efficient it is at just taking the board's life total down. Because if you play it turn 2 and Jon Irenicus turn 4 and give it away, then it's immediately swinging. 2 people are losing 6 life. That'll drain the board in a couple turns, even if you don't do anything else.
This is kind of weird. I'm starting to see similarities between this deck and my old Mogus Group Slug deck.
Yes.
Where just every action your opponents are taking is causing them to lose life. But the way that this deck goads your opponent's creatures is doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's making everybody lose life at a faster rate than they would have because combat is happening, plus the drains that you're having them take from Pitiless Horde, Serendib Efreet, Sleeper Agent, all of these 3/3 goaded flyers, all of them being goaded, is creating that rapid decrease of all of your opponent's life totals at the same time. I think that's really cool. That's a lot of fun to see blue doing what a Rakdos deck is pretty well known for.
Yeah, and that's what makes this deck so fun. It is a control deck. You'll see from the next few cards we're talking about, and from all the interaction cards we talked about, it's drawing lots of cards, it's stopping your opponent's game plans, it's causing lots of sacrifice and keeping you from playing creatures or things like that. But it's so aggressive. Yeah. So it doesn't halt the game, it speeds it up, but at the same time you're just pointing everyone's creatures and removal elsewhere, and you can kind of sit back and relax a little bit. Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
So cool. I want to talk about Rotting Regisaur.
Absolutely.
Another control piece. We talked a little bit earlier about a few cards that cause discard whenever they enter. And Rotting Regisaur is another card that's just going to absolutely shred your opponent's hands. It's a 7/6 zombie dinosaur. Yeah. For 3 mana, 2 and a black. Again, what? That's not normal to have such a huge body for so cheap. And it's because of this debilitating upkeep trigger. At the beginning of your upkeep, discard a card. So if I were playing this in Standard, it comes out on turn 3, I have a massive threat to my opponent's life total, and the price I'm paying for that is discarding a card. Well, I'm not in Standard. I'm in Commander. I have 3 other opponents. I'm going to give my opponent a 9/8 goated creature, and they have to discard a card every turn. Mm-hmm. Oh my god. That is not right. That is really upsetting. That's awesome.
Okay. The next class of creatures, again, more chip damage, are the ones that say every time something happens, lose a life. Mm-hmm. And so a great example of this is Wretched Anurid. It's a 3/3 for 2, 1 and a black. So again, that great rate for a zombie frog beast. That says whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you lose 1 life. So that's you playing creatures, that's your opponent's playing creatures. If they play something that creates 5 tokens, you're going to lose 5 life. So it's just something that happens a lot in our Commander games. Yeah. And it's just, and of course, I've given it to you. So it's a 5/5 when you get it. It's goated, so it's swinging in hard. But then every time someone does something or you do something that creates a creature on the battlefield, you lose another life. So there's several similar to that. There's Eben Drake.
I think that might have been all.
Yeah, okay.
Wretched Anurid and Eben Drake. But yeah, they're both going to continue that ever-lowering life totals.
Yep.
It's pretty cool.
Okay, and then the last class of creatures.
Oh my god.
The ones that I love the most, and the ones that really made me cling to this deck when Travis gave it to me, is the ones that make you sacrifice when you play the game. Because these cards, normally their biggest downside is you might end up sacrificing them. But Jon Irenicus gives them the text that they cannot be sacrificed. And that means that when they cause you to sacrifice things, you have to sacrifice your other things. The things that were part of your game plan. Your lands, maybe. Like, they don't care. They're going to just keep whittling away your resources until you have nothing left. And my favorite one of these is the Phyrexian Negator. Phyrexian Negator is a 5/5 trample for 3. It costs 2 and a black. So when I give it away, it's a 7/7 trample. And I can try to mitigate its downside by just keeping it out of combat until I can get Jon Irenicus in play the next turn, hopefully. But its downside is whenever it's dealt damage, you sacrifice that many permanents. So
yeah, for each 1 damage dealt to it, you sacrifice a permanent.
So if they put their 3/3 beast token in front of it and you trample in for 4 damage on top of that, you have to sacrifice 3 permanents. And it can't be Phyrexian Negator. It can't be sacrificed.
Oh my god. So
I mean, that your board is going to be nothing but the things I give you when you're done with this.
Disgusting.
It's just so beautiful.
This art is amazing. The one that I'm looking at here in front of me, he looks like a xenomorph alien with like gold accents, and
yeah,
that is a really, really amazing artwork too.
Mm-hmm. A similar one, and I think this is your favorite, right? Do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah. So I think I remember getting this one into the deck whenever I built it. It's called Desecration Elemental. It costs 4 mana. Wow, what could we get for 4 mana? 3 and a black for an 8/8.
8/8. 10/10 when I give it away.
10/10 when you give it away. It's an elemental. It has fear, which means that it can only be blocked by black or artifact creatures.
Right.
And then it says, whenever a player plays a spell, sacrifice a creature. Every time the person who owns Desecration Elemental plays a spell, you have to sacrifice a creature. Every time your 3 opponents play any spells, you have to sacrifice a creature. Dang. And you can't sacrifice it. Yeah. This is just going to decimate the rest of your creature front.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really, really cool. And it's going to swing in for 10.
Yeah.
With fear.
And yeah, likely can't be blocked if you give it to the right opponent, right? When it swings in at the green player, the green-red player who's not playing artifact creatures,
yeah,
they just can't block it. They're
10
taking
damage
10.
a turn.
Yeah.
10 damage. That's so cool. I'm really glad that I was able to find something, and I'm glad to see that it's still here.
Yes. Oh, yeah. It's one of the best cards in the deck. It's great.
Costs $450. You know,
yeah.
that was a bite of the budget.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there's several of those that cause you to sacrifice. There's Rust Elemental. There's Greater Harvester. One of the cool ones is Drinker of Sorrow. Also says when you deal combat damage, sacrifice a permanent. And so these things are goated. They're always dealing combat damage.
Yeah.
So there's just a bunch of these that make you sacrifice your board as you swing, and you can't get rid of it. You can't sacrifice it, so you're stuck with it.
Yeah. So that's the fun package of poisoned gifts that you can give to your opponents. And that is going to bring us now to our last category, our plan B, our recursion. Each of these deck techs, we asked the question, what's your plan if Jon Irenicus himself gets removed too many times, becomes uncastable, gets Darksteel mutationed, gets turned into a 1/1 bug that can't do anything? What's your plan when Jon gets removed? Because your deck is full of these big creatures with downsides, and then these 1/1 flyers.
Right.
How are you gonna push through and try to win the game without having your main engine on board?
Sure. So there's a couple ways to win. One is with the recursion engine. Instead of letting him go back to the command zone and cost 12 mana, you can just put him back in your graveyard and use something like Phyrexian Reclamation or Oversold Cemetery to keep getting him back and replaying him. Sometimes that's not going to work. So if it's Darksteel Mutation or something like that where he's just stuck not doing his thing, I can hope for a bounce spell, but most likely I'm just going to have to resort to one of my miscellaneous cards that lets me continue to give things away without Jon Irenicus. I have 3 cards that do that. There's Wrong Turn, where it's just an instant speed, someone else gains control of something. I can use that to get rid of one of these really bad downside creatures that I played and got stuck with somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll continue the thing where they hopefully are attacking their opponents and not me, but at least gets them off my side. Modify Memory is similar. It lets me exchange control of 2 target creatures controlled by different players. So I can, if I have a Greater Harvester or a Rust Elemental and it's really killing me, I can trade it for your best creature. And now I'm back online and you're stuck with something with downside. Modify Memory also has a secret mode. It says if you control neither creature, draw 3 cards.
Yeah.
So I can swap 2 people's commanders and kind of shut down their deck. Or swap somebody's blocker with something that can't block that their opponent has, or something like that. Draw 3 cards and really mess up somebody's game plan in the process. So it does have that other mode. And then there's Fateful Handoff that says draw cards equal to the mana value of target artifact or creature you control, and then an opponent gains control of that permanent. So it's a way for me to, once again, give away a creature that might be stuck on my board. I don't care that the Phyrexian Negator is going to swing at me. I want you to have it, not me. So play Fateful Handoff. It's a sorcery that costs 3 and a black. I'll draw 3 cards and give you Phyrexian Negator. Fine.
Yeah.
That's great. There's also the fact that everything in the deck is either an evasive creature or an undercosted beater. Means that if it's late in the game when I no longer have access to Jon Irenicus, I can always just try to close out the game with my unblockable Evil Eye of Worms by Gore or my flying Rust Elemental or
your Fear Desecration Elemental.
Right, exactly.
I can keep swinging in yourself.
Yeah, just keep doing it and hope that I have the time, because I have seen other decks win with a bunch of cheap flyers.
Oh yeah.
You just, hey, we've gotten enough chip damage, we've all been attacking each other, it's the late rounds, and I have 12 life and you have 12 life, and I can't get my commander anymore. Fine, I'm going to swing in with 3 flyers and hold back my little 1/1 tokens, that maybe I got with Callous Bloodmage or something. And I'm just going to hope that I can clog the board up long enough to chip in with flyers. Or, like you said, get in one good attack with a Desecration Elemental before I have to sacrifice it or whatever. And that, I think, will take this deck a long way. And it kind of comes to what separates this from a lot of the other Jon Irenicus decks. I only have 17 of those cheap downside beaters. And that's because I don't want to get stuck. I don't want to have to rely on Jon Irenicus because he is a removal target.
Oh, yeah.
And there's only so many times you can cast him. There's only so many times you can recur him. And I want to have gotten the value and be able to close out a game without fear that I have a bunch of unplayable cards. So the ones that I do have, they're effective, they're cheap. I mentioned earlier the curve is low so that I can play them right before or right after playing Jon Irenicus without fear of them getting stuck in my hand. There are some really awesome high-end downside creatures out there that cost 7 or 8 mana and completely devastate you and your opponents, but I don't want to get stuck with those in my hand, and I don't want... Their downsides are so devastating that I don't want to get stuck without Jon Irenicus and have an unplayable card.
Yeah.
And so there are a few. There's like 3 or 4 that are a concern to get to that, but I've tried to minimize those as much as possible. And so that's plan C is I'm just going to beat you with the creatures I've got.
Yeah.
You know.
And then just pay their downside when they come and hope that you can win the race to get their life total down.
Exactly.
Yeah. I was thinking again about the type of removal of sending creatures back to your hand. And I remember that when you played Jon Irenicus and I was playing that Nabon Wizard deck, I just kept sending Jon back to your hand.
It was super annoying.
That's going to put you back 4 mana every turn if you're just recasting him that way. And so that means every turn you'd have to go Jon Irenicus and a cheap creature.
Yeah.
Well, I think having so many cheap creatures is a solution to that. Yeah. You were able to play Jon Irenicus every turn, plus your cheap creature that you can still give it away, that you can still draw the card or surveil or whatever, and then still give it away so that your game plan stays online.
Yeah.
I think that's a really smart move. Anything else that you want to hit for Jon Irenicus?
For anybody who's on the fence about Jon Irenicus, it's super fun to play. It's very cheap to build. It works along a different axis, and I really appreciate that my brother gave it to me. It's something I would have never built myself, but I'm so glad I have it.
What is your final cost for this deck?
This deck, as built, costs $82.81. Probably needs a little bit of upgrading in the mana base, but otherwise, I think it's almost perfect as is for $83.
That is so, so cool. And a lot of the cards, especially lands and your mana rock cards, those just enter into your collection as you buy packs, as you buy a precon or whatever. These are cards that they'll just arrive in your collection.
Right.
You know, I wouldn't tell you to go online and specifically spend 70 cents for a Felwar Stone.
Right.
Like, they're just going to come in pre-constructed decks as you build your collection.
Yeah, and I would actually, if you're struggling to get something like a Felwar Stone or whatever, or those sorts of things are the things that might put you over your budget, don't worry about that for this deck in particular. Yeah. Right? It has so many low cost 1, 2, and 3 mana creatures that I would be okay cutting basically all the ramp for a few more lands and a few more 1 or 2 mana scry.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, I think you could go to say 39 lands and 6 more scry creatures, and you'd be fine.
Yeah.
You know, you don't need to spend $2 for a Soul Ring, you know, which is about as cheap as it's ever been, and
it'll stay at that price forever. I think.
It goes up in between printings,
Commander deck printings. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the more expensive cards like Brazen Borrower, there's plenty of things that say when enters the battlefield, bounce something. Just find one, right?
Oh yeah.
And the deck takes very little. It takes very little loss from something like that. This deck is so fun to play and so cheap to get into and can still be good without the high cost cards that I highly recommend this for anyone who's, say, an intermediate builder who enjoys the puzzle of figuring out how to win, how to get your opponents down without a combo and without the big creatures on your side of the board. It's kind of a fourth way.
Yeah. Really cool. Well, Benjamin, thank you so much for walking us through Jon Irenicus Shattered One. I am so glad that I was able to find something that spoke to you, that really opened up your puzzle solving
it was great.
Experience. And we have a really fun deck in our meta now that gets continued play. And that doesn't always happen with our Secret Santa deck. So that's exciting for me as the original builder, and I'm sure exciting for you as you found something new.
Absolutely.
Listeners, remember that if you have further questions about the deck, you can always leave comments on YouTube. Benjamin and I are both very active in responding to YouTube questions or comments. You can write messages directly to mymthicalmeta@eldoradogaming.com. And don't forget that you can purchase dice and other role-playing game accessories from eldoradogaming.com using the promo code META for 10% off. Thank you very much for listening. Tune in next time for a good deck.
Bye.
Bye.
This episode was sponsored by Eldorado Gaming. Use the promo code META for 10% off your order. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share. This episode was edited by me, Travis Konishek, and our intro and outro music is by Tyler Heath of the Oh Hellos.